And as an entrepreneur, I think sometimes people get into being an entrepreneur and they want to be a boss, but they want to be a boss too early.
Too early.
Right? So unless you can't replace you if you don't have the resources and you're not providing an opportunity and you can't cast a clear vision for the people that you have up under you, right? So I'm not the type of person who I want a large staff to feed my ego to say I got all these people that work for me or I got all these people who up under me. You know what I mean? If we can work together and you can do your own thing and keep your own thing, more power to you. What attracts you to real estate?
What attracts me to real estate?
Yeah.
As I was saying, like really, it's everywhere, right? So for me, I think about in my world, outside of me having my own house, of course, but curating and having spaces to where, like you were saying earlier in the other video, people pay me to occupy the space, but then I'm also at this vested interest because there's a lot of things that I would love to see happen that I'm like, all right, if I had the space, I could be like, here's content studio, here's the restaurant, it's the food that I would eat every day if I had an option. It's the power and ability to create the space to where these people can that's actually maybe the actual thing, I still can benefit from it. Not only on the monetary side, but also the experience side. Like you were saying earlier, like you wouldn't have a club, you wouldn't do a day-to-day with the club stuff, but if somebody that you knew that would can operate it and own it as their club, you have the real estate, you still get a benefit from it because now you are, vested in a way.
Right. So let me I don't want to take away from anything you just said in terms of the power of your perspective in terms of what you in real estate, right?
Right.
But we talked about different principles and how they're universal. Right. We didn't necessarily always talk about them in the context of how they affect real estate or my view on real estate. Right. We kind of just always address them as these are universal principles. You can apply them to anything. Right. Now if we're gonna get into real estate, we need to be clear on how I tell you and how we spoke and how we've established these principles and how I apply them directly to real estate. Right. So I think one of the videos that we put out, the full one, was why passion is not enough.
Correct.
Right. But I didn't really speak on that in real estate specifically. Right. But some of what you just described sounds like what you're passionate about for real estate. Right. And I mentioned in a previous sit down about my desire to be involved in different businesses and what real estate has done and how real estate has provided me opportunities to be involved in those businesses, as well as putting me in position to allow other people to participate and allow other people to participate and create their own dreams using real estate that I own and so on and so on, right? We spoke about that. So the first thing I would say to your desire and input into why you want to get into real estate or what about real estate interests you is, at its core, everything does involve real estate, right? But I think one of the principles we talked about before is we got to do what makes sense, right? And so the first thing with real estate information and real estate knowledge, the first thing I try to give you if you don't have a whole lot of experience is understanding that real estate is local, right? There's not a such thing as a national real estate market, right? And so that's key and that's very, very important because let me ask you this: when you say you're interested in real estate, where do you get some of your real estate ideas from, or inspiration, or information? Where does that come from?
Like you talking about people that I maybe watch or something?
Yeah, if that's
I bought some books. I bought some books like the Millionaire Investor, of course, Robert Kiyosaki. I study a lot of his stuff. Yeah. And then early on, it was Max Maxwell.
Okay.
So it's just different people that I've studied over time. But that's kind of how I just Definitely, books I was gonna give
Okay.
some context, but
Yeah. So, and I've heard of several of those people in different levels and different. I have a different awareness of kind of what they believe in or what their core teachings are.
Yeah.
But the reason I ask that is because, again, I can't hit home enough with this point that there's no such thing as a national real estate market. It's
Right.
all local, right? It's all local based. So if you getting your information from somebody who's in a complete different market than you, the principles and the knowledge and the wisdom, as much as it may be good-willed and good intentions, it may not apply to what you're doing, right?
Definitely.
Now, again, there's certain principles and strategies that are universal, but there's also certain things that are even more important that are unique to your area, your local market, and the current market conditions, right? So when I mentioned to you that I do Airbnbs, right? Similar to the one we doing this interview in, I do commercial property, right? I own office buildings. I own places where they have lounges. I own places where there's construction companies that rent properties from me, right? Those are opportunities that presented themselves at a certain time in my journey in building my portfolio where it made sense. I was getting good deals. I structured good deals. I was able to structure those deals in certain type of ways. Specifically, some of my commercial property I bought out of bankruptcy. Other commercial property I bought by buying somebody's option and getting seller financing. Other opportunities, I bought another commercial building where there was a partnership between two partners that one partner wanted out, the other partner wanted to stay in. They didn't want to buy them out, and so they were willing to liquidate the property at a great price, right? So I speak of those things, but they came at times where opportunity presented itself and I was positioned in a situation to be able to take those risks, right? But for commercial, you got to buy at the right price. It has to be the right time. You have to structure the deal properly. It is dependent on tenants and cash flow and being able to get the
area too.
And area and being able to get the property leased for reasonable amount of rents, right? And so the commercial stuff is more the glorified piece, right? But I couldn't buy those type of properties if I didn't buy the single families that I had that generate the level of cash flow to put me in a position to be ready to take those type of risks, right? And so if your appeal to real estate is, hey, I want to get in and own a bunch of commercial property, well, if you don't have a business that's cash flowing or you don't have other assets in real estate that's cash flowing, starting in commercial real estate or multifamily stuff or stuff that could be more speculative, I wouldn't advise you to do, right? It's kind of going back to those principles of we do what we got to do first so that then we can do what we want to do, right? We're going to do these single families and these maybe raggedy houses that we had to buy and remodel and put some investment and love in it or whatever you had to do to generate the cash flow to where you can take that and invest it in stuff that's sexy and more attractive and fulfilling and purposeful of providing opportunities and those kind of things, right? Because if you get into it and you romanticize real estate as just this way to make a whole lot of money and stand in front of the building and take the picture, and you ain't paying attention to the fundamentals and the numbers and the cash flow, you're not going to be in the business very long, right? And so one of the things that I would want to encourage and advise young investors or people interested in getting into the industry is when you first getting started out, the sexy investments, the sexy properties are not what you want to get started in. If you can get started in one of those and you can find it in a situation that somebody needs to liquidate it quick or it's a distressed property, by all means get started in commercial or multifamily. I'm not knocking that lane, right? But I think I meet a lot of young investors or people interested in the industry getting started, and they had a mindset so set on, I only want to do 2 units, 3, 4 units in commercial property. I don't want to mess with single family. And again, I understand that perspective in certain situations, but a lot of times it's because they heard somebody on YouTube or they heard somebody on a podcast speak as you need to start here. And for that person, that may have worked. And in that market, there may be an abundance of deals where the numbers, make sense for you to get started at that level. But in another market, single family, and where you live geographically in the location you in, single family may not only be the only way to start, it might be the best way to start.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? So that you can build cash flow and capital, and then you use the cash flow and capital that you're able to generate off of assets that maybe not be so sexy, maybe not be so interesting and creative and monumental and legacy plays, but they're part of the equation to give you the cash flow, the experience, the deal negotiation, the underwriting experience, the running comps, to figure out the business and the industry of how you can make money. And then we can go buy stuff that we want to have long term and that are more legacy plays. But we can't start with the legacy plays first, because sometimes that's so attached to a vision or image or what you think real estate should be that the fundamentals aren't there. You know what I mean? Once you got the fundamentals set and the cash flow is there, then you can take more risk and do more speculative investing. But I don't advise people who are first getting started to do anything that's speculative or high risk, because you don't have the capital to sustain some of those mistakes that are going to naturally come, especially when you first get started.
And if you was to ask me the second part of that, you was asking me what attracted me to real estate. Outside of that, it is cash flow, right? And I think going back to our other conversations, not make everything about money, right. Then also, cash flow is king. Like, it's important when it comes to, I feel like one important thing when it comes to real estate, because if you ain't cash flowing, you ain't really
absolutely
be able to take that and reinvest.
Yeah.
But like you were saying, it might not be the sexiest spaces, right? Mm-hmm. And so with me, I again, use my media company as my example. The things that I shoot that I might not shoot as much of, but I'll shoot like the documentaries and stuff. Yeah. Those are the things I would do, is less days, but more creative work versus commercials. But I get 10 of those. It might be the sexiest all the time, but they still fall in line with my scope of work. Right. But 10 of those to 3 of these documentaries I might want to do. Well, I might have to do those right now just to cash flow. Right. And then be like, all right, cool, I can then. It might not be as much time, but I can take that time to being like, all right, I can do these documentaries. Okay, and I got cash flow from both of those. Right. Then it's like, okay, when I get to the real estate side, I'm starting back over, because now with the money that I got, it might not go as far with this unsexy. I mean, it might go further with this unsexy property than trying to go, like you said, commercial. Absolutely. And I'm not going to have as much. Absolutely. So in portfolio construction is what I would describe this as, right? Okay. Especially when, if I say I'm a real estate investor, like, what do you invest in? Right? I'm running the gamut. If it's real estate, the numbers make sense. This is all the numbers business, right? There's certain things that are out of my wheelhouse that maybe require more management that I'm not familiar with, whether you're talking about group homes or certain elements of real estate where you can get into renting by the room or renting by the bed and that kind of stuff that requires more management, and it's more of a business than just a real estate play that I don't have a whole lot of experience in. Right. But when it comes to the real estate business, it's a numbers business, right? Yeah. We don't get emotional or connected to too many of these properties until you're in a position where you might make an emotional purchase, but I ain't gonna make no money on that, but that's cool. I'm making enough money over here that I can lose a little bit on this because this means something, or this is a way for me to create, or this is a property that was in my family. For like I was telling my grandma's home essentially.
Yeah. So you can do those kind of things when the fundamentals don't make sense if you got enough resources and cash flow from other just full business deals to support that, right? But you don't want to start with an emotional play. You don't want to start with an emotional buy off of, hey, my grandma used to live here, so now I'm going to go overpay for it so that I can post, hey, I bought back the block, bought my grandma's house. You know what I mean? But if you got 30, 40 houses and they all cash flowing and you got solid fundamentals on those, and you want to go waste some money on your grandmother's house, and I say on your grandmother's house, to purchase it back from somebody who may have bought it a couple of years ago because it means something to you. Well, now you're in a position to do that, and it's not going to crush your portfolio. Right. You see what I mean? Right. So I'm not saying don't do that, because I have some of those purchases and some of those assets in my portfolio that have sentimental value or that are long-term speculative investments that they break even or even lose a little money, but I see the vision for the area and the appreciation for that area. Yeah. So I invest in those, not because they make so much in the short term, because I can see the vision and the development for the future.
Long term.
Right? Yeah. And so you can apply that same principle to stuff that means something to you personally or to your family, that, hey, I want to own grandma's house. I want to own an old house that I used to grow up in, right? Yeah. If you can make those houses work for the numbers, by all means, go ahead and do that too. But if you're trying to be a real estate investor and make money, or transition from a business, or transition from a 9 to 5, don't go overpay for an emotional purchase because it means something to you, but the numbers don't work. And then now you think real estate don't work because you bought it emotionally for some reasons that is not connected to the fundamentals of the business. You understand what I'm saying? Gotcha. So the way I look at it in constructing a portfolio is we have assets that cash flow, and then we have assets that appreciate. But that's consistent with my market, right? Gotcha. There's not a lot of houses in Oklahoma City or in some of these Midwest or southern states that have large appreciation that you may see on the coast from LA's and New York's, right? There's a lot of appreciation, but there's a lot of speculation, which means it can go real, real high, it can go real, real low. Right? So when you get your real estate advice from people who invest or live in these coasts, it's not really tailored to the market you're in. And that's why I say it's so important, right? But a market like Oklahoma City, in the surrounding areas, the thing is you get the benefit of both, but you got to know where to look, and you got to study the market, and you got to know what you're going after. Right. You know what I mean? So there's certain areas and certain sides of the city and certain sides of the state that they're only cash flow plays, right? Because you're not going to see a lot of appreciation, meaning they're not going to go up in value significantly.
But you can cash flow them every month. Though.
But you can cash flow them every month, right? Then there's pockets in OKC that the price point may be a little higher and it's hard to get in, but the city is developing in that area, right? So they don't cash flow now, but you plan more of a gamble and a speculative play on those houses, right? But the only way to be in position to see that appreciation is if you locked in and you in a position to hold them long term to ride that wave, because the market can go up and down, right? If you invested into speculative investments, meaning, hey, I bought it for $400,000, I'm hoping it's gonna go to 600, and you in a position based off of the debt or your finances or the loan that you got or whatever that you need to sell it in the next 6 months, you're not in position to ride the wave of the ups and downs of the market to where you can make it 10 years, and we know over 10, 20 years, it's definitely gonna go up, right? If you got to sell in the next 6 months to a year, you're not in a position to ride that, right? So you shouldn't play in speculative games. You know what I mean? You shouldn't be playing in markets where the stakes is that high, where it can go that high and that low. You need to play in a more, this is what it is. I can cash flow these houses. We can buy houses in this area for 150 grand. Okay, well, we can't build no houses for 150 grand, so we know they can't go much lower than this. Right. So depending on the market, sometimes we're insulated by construction costs, new regulation. There's all kind of things that come into play to where, you know, if you can buy a house for 100 grand, it might not be worth 100 grand in the area it's in because there's pockets of it, but we know we can't go build it for 100 grand, right? So if we get it now and we don't have to sell it for a long period of time, then that's a sign that could be a strategic investment and a possible good investment, because we can't replace it, because we can't build for that cost today.
So saying like you had to tear it down, you couldn't build it for the price it would cost.
Exactly.
Got you.
Yeah, you can't go build a $1,500 square foot house for 100 grand or 80 grand.
Not in this climate.
Not in this climate. It don't exist, right? So if you buy one, the area and the rents may not support that just yet, because it could be in a rundown area. You see what I mean? But we know you can't go build it for that. You know what I'm saying? So I think overall, how I would sum that up is, for any young investor, understanding, you know, what you see sometimes on social media or even in your market if you don't understand why people are investing in what they're investing in, or why the market is the way that it is in that certain area, certain moves people make won't make sense to you. So you got to do your market research and really, really learn and really, really observe what's at play. And the two questions you could ask is this a cash flow play, or is this a appreciation speculative play? Right? Mm-hmm. If you don't have no capital, you don't have no resources, you don't have no banks, you don't have no relationships, you don't have no reserves, I encourage you to stay away from anything that's speculative, anything you have, unless you're doing wholesales where you're not, really involved in the deal in terms of ownership and taking over ownership. You could do more wholesaling and flipping, but to actually buy stuff and remodel it or build from the ground up, and it being so heavy, reliant on interest rates and market timing for 6-12 months, especially with the political environment and the climate that we in, I don't advise people to get started with anything that's speculative, right? Now, if you got a bunch of experience building houses and you can build them super cheap, you can get land for super cheap, you got contractors who you got relationships with and suppliers on materials that you got a niche in and an advantage, and you can build quickly before interest rates change and the environment change, then possibly you could look at that. But for the average person just coming in off the street, hey, I heard about real estate, I think it's important. I think it's something I should invest in. I advise get in something that you can either wholesale, something that you can rent out and cash flow, and something that is cash flow related as opposed to speculative and more gambling.
And so that's I look at that a lot. Like this, I won't say it stopped me, but really just knowing more about it, right? Like you said, it's definitely area based, right? Because here versus, like you said, California or Florida, that's 3 different markets. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So it's definitely one of those. But that's why I think you utilize the information to tailor to you. I think it's what, even your content is important for, I would say, smaller markets, but in a sense, Oklahoma is a smaller market. But like just those things. So like what you asked the question in these notes is, what does it mean to invest ethically in real estate?
I mean, there's, in terms of that, when I wrote about that, what I was thinking of versus, I'll put it like this, some recent experiences I've had.
Okay. You don't have to go too much in detail if you don't want to.
I'm going to tread lightly. And we'll maneuver it. I mean, I think, again, like we spoke about before, doing everything with a level of ethics is important, right? In real estate, ethics are definitely important, right? But different people view it differently, right? If me and you make an agreement and you don't hold up your end of the agreement, and then because you don't hold up your end of the agreement, you try to act like the other person did something unethical, that's not fair, right? So everything is negotiable and everything is agreeable. I think clear communication, I think clear expectations between you and the buyer, or you and the seller, is definitely the best policy, right? I think people who are, looking for ways to make money, but they don't really care who they step on, they don't really care who they affect, I think that's the biggest issue. I think a lot of investors can get a bad rep or a bad name because they just out to or they're perceived to be out to make as much money as possible. Right?
No matter the cost of anybody else.
Right. So, but I think we also have to have a level of respect and responsibility for people doing business. You know what I mean? If somebody calls me and say, hey, I got a house for sale, what will you offer me for, right? Well, a lot of times you could get somebody who says, hey, this person only paid $30,000 for this house, and then they sold it for $200,000, right? And for a person who don't understand that, you just think this greedy person just made $170,000, right? You don't realize you looking at county records, or you think this person made this type of money on a transaction, you don't realize it was the fees that was involved, the construction, the permits, the holding costs, the loan costs. They remodeled the house for 2 or 3 years and paid interest on that money the whole time. They had 2 or 3 contractors run out on them that stole some of their money, or whatever the dynamic is.
So much stuff.
It's so many things in between that we got to allow people to do business. But I think there is a level of industry where, you know, certain people can go out there and just lie and do whatever they want to do. And they do give the industry a bad name, right? But I don't think that's the majority of real estate investors. I think the majority of real estate investors, and I think it's important for people to understand, most real estate investors are not just this large corporation making all this money. It's people who, like yourself, they got into it. They trying to figure out a way to provide for themselves and provide for their family. And when somebody calls who wants to sell a house, they looking at, okay, well, what do you need? You need to get out of a situation. You got a house you need to sell. You need cash fast, whatever those situations are. They trying to provide and solve a problem for these people, buy a house and flip it and make a profit for their family, right? Now, you know, there's industries and there's people and there's corporations and machines that are on autopilot, and with the level of AI and automation, sending out mailers to thousands and thousands of people a day. Right. You know what I mean? And then they get somebody and they may represent themselves as a real estate professional and take advantage of an old lady who thinks the house ain't worth nothing, and they go in or lie to them and tell them the house ain't worth nothing. Okay, yeah, that may happen. Right. But for the most part, those aren't the situation. You know what I'm saying? So I think definitely we got to do everything with a level of ethical standards and ethical code. But I also think for real estate investors specifically, we got to allow investors and understand, like, there's cost in things that the average person don't realize exist, right? So you can't think that these people are making all this money because you don't understand it. It's a lot of risk. It's a lot of headache. It's a lot of management. It's a lot of frustration that comes with it. And so we got to allow people to transact and do business, correctly, right? I think one thing in our state that is nuanced, and this exists in other states, and we talk about local markets, but, you know, there's a lot of people who do wholesaling, right? I'm not a wholesaler, but I have wholesaled a house a couple of times here and there, right? Wholesaling is you get a property under contract from somebody and then you sell that contract to somebody else, right? So I don't do a lot of that. Most of the stuff I get under contract, I purchase myself. Every once in a while, I'll have somebody call me and ask me, do I have a deal? Or because they know I own property, am I interested in selling something? So I may say, hey, I got 3 or 4 deals. I'm running behind on construction. You know what I mean? Something like that. And I wholesale those deals. But I think one of the things that has recently happened is they've kind of blurred the lines between wholesalers and real estate agents. Right? And so the ethics that apply to real estate agents is different than the ethics that apply to real estate investors. Now, it's not to say both shouldn't operate with a level of ethics, but there is a nuance and a difference to me, which I don't know why they tried to merge them. Right? So, and what that is, you know, a real estate agent has a fiduciary responsibility to their customer and to their client, right? To act in their best interest, represent their interests, right? So when a real estate agent is also a wholesaler, to me, there's a conflict there.
A huge conflict.
But that's what the state and licensing boards have kind of wanted it to be, right? Because for various reasons, and we can get into that, and maybe we'll talk about that in another video if you got a follow-up question on that. But I say that to say, you know, certain things that you expect a real estate agent to do, you shouldn't expect from a real estate investor, right? And any investor or any person is looking to get a good deal, right? But if I'm your agent and I'm representing you, I'm here to get you the best deal. Right. To me, those are two different things. So when they try to blur those lines and make agents, wholesalers have to become agents to do that, to me, that's a conflict of interest and sending a mixed message to the industry, one, and to the public. But to me, they're not the same thing. You know what I mean? And so I'm not a real estate agent. I am a real estate investor. I think there's been a lot of talk about, you know, what wholesalers do and if wholesaling is ethical or unethical. My approach is I bought properties from wholesalers.
Right.
I buy properties from agents who bring me houses before a seller wants to put it on the market because they don't want to do repairs or maintenance or whatever those things are. And so I think there's a place for everybody if we can get a level of understanding of what should be done and how things should be handled. And as long as people are upfront of who they are, what their intentions are, I think we got to allow people to transact and do business without a whole bunch of constraints.
Right.
But at the same time, if you're representing yourself as an agent with a fiduciary responsibility to people who are coming to you to ask you about insight about how much their house may be worth or, you know, what they should do with a property or whatever, and they coming to you for advice, you should provide that in what is their best interest, not what's in the best interest of you. Right. Now, if you make the distinction between, hey, I'm an investor too, hey, I can present you with two options. Okay. If that's the case, then cool. But I think there's a lot of disconnect of what's ethical, unethical between real estate agents and real estate investors. And we're trying to act like they're the same thing. And then there's rules and regulations that are trying to blur those lines even harder. So when they're getting discussed, there's not a distinction being made. Yeah. But I encourage people, if you want to learn about real estate, becoming a real estate agent is fine. I love working with real estate agents. You know what I mean? I think there's a lot of real estate agents who are smart, intelligent, know what they bring to the table, want to give good guidance to their clients. And then there's some real estate agents who think they know way more than they do. Mm-hmm. They not investors. They want to be investors, but they don't either have the capital, the knowledge, or the resources, or the understanding to do it. And so they take this approach that, hey, I'm good, you're bad. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think that's a mistake. And I think there is a world where real estate investors can work with real estate agents and provide services and resources to their clients and opportunities to their clients or solutions to whatever problems their clients are experiencing.
Yeah, I think that's like you said, that distinction is important because I even see some real estate agents could be investors when the time presents itself, but I think that's a level. It's a whole nother level of, because my eyes, real estate agents operating under someone else's company, and essentially, and an investor can be, like you said, solo entrepreneur, solo investor. Right. Kind of creates his own. I don't think a lot of people that are real estate agents know the commitment it takes to do the investor side. Right. And so the reason I wanted to talk about that is relationships. Yeah. And how big relationships have been for you in real estate and why that is important when it comes to real estate.
Now, that's powerful. Relationships is the key for sure in real estate, right? But, you know, how do you develop real estate relationships? It's networking, it's being reliable, being dependable, being responsive, doing what you say you're gonna do. You know what I mean? If you're getting properties under contract or you saying you're gonna be here at a certain time to walk a property, you showing up or you sending somebody, and just being available and having a level of connection and just doing what you say you're gonna do is how you develop those relationships. Yeah. I think what's key is access to capital. You know what I mean? And access to capital and getting out of your limiting beliefs. You know what I mean? There's a world of capital out there that the average person is not aware of, even if you bought a personal residence, right? Because once you get into commercial lending and you get into private lending or you get into private equity, like it's a whole nother world of equity and lending options out there to aspiring entrepreneurs that somebody who only bought a primary residence or somebody who's looking to get in the industry is not aware of, right? So I think becoming aware of that, meeting local lenders and local banks and private lenders and private equity people to get a level of understanding of what resources are out there, that's one of the key and biggest relationships. But in that, you have to be presentable in terms of you got to understand how to fill out a financial statement. You know what I mean? You got to understand, make sure you doing your taxes and you got your tax returns in place, whether you're doing a business and you getting a 1099 or K1 or W-2s, and you got to understand that you need to file that and show some income and keep your personal credit score up. You know what I mean? So when you go in and you're trying to build those relationships, when they look in your past and your history, that you have some foundation to show you're a responsible individual. Right. You know what I mean? Right. So though that access to capital is one of the biggest relationships that can change the whole trajectory of what it is that you're trying to do. But just like we said, you got to be prepared for that when you meet it, right? So I wasn't aware of all of those lending opportunities when I first got started. I was under the impression that everything was very, very similar to buying a primary residence, right? And so it wasn't even that I didn't know what I didn't know. It's that I thought I knew that this was the only way to operate. So I had locked myself into that box. You know what I mean? But as you become more aware and you network and get that lending relationship, I think the biggest key, even more than access to capital, but they're both very important. Let me say that. But finding a good deal, right? And studying the market and understanding what a good deal is, right? Because whether you believe it or not, if you have a great deal and the deal can stand alone, you can find the capital, right? And I know that's hard for certain people to believe because they don't have the capital, right? But I'm telling you, if you got a great enough deal, I'll give you the capital. And there's a bunch of people like me who will do the same thing. You know what I'm saying?
You say you got a great enough deal, you give the capital to
Yeah. I mean, it all comes back down to numbers. What's the loan to the ARV, the after repair value, and what can you get it under contract for, and how much work does it need, right? We can and then what does it rent for or sell for? If you can answer all of that and those numbers are good enough and there's a big enough gap between what the cost is going to be and what our sales price is going to be, or what the cost is going to be monthly and what our rental price is going to be, you can find the capital for that deal.
Gotcha.
Right? Whether it's through private lenders or whether it's through bank lenders. Now, when you go to those private lenders or bank lenders, what's going to help you is having a solid credit score, tax return, so on and so on. But if you got a good enough deal, those other things become less important. It's less important than your credit score. If you bring me a building that's worth $1 million and you got it under contract for $300,000, I don't care what your credit score is.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? It doesn't matter. It's not in the equation. So in that situation, your credit score is not the problem. Your tax return is not the problem. You don't have a deal you can bring me that's worth $1 million for $300,000.
Or that's you do have a deal, you don't have a relationship with somebody that can invest in this outside of a bank or private lender.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
Absolutely. But what I'm telling you is that capital is way more plentiful than the average young person specifically thinks it is, because when you don't have capital, you think that's the only problem, right? And again, when you have a good deal, especially when you get to a higher or larger level, access to capital can become a problem. But for the average person, when we start talking and in our market, when you're talking single family, there's enough people looking for good deals and transacting here where if you bring a deal with good enough spreads, access to capital, the barriers to that get removed very quickly, because there's a lot of people looking for good deals. You understand what I'm saying? When you get into larger, scalable commercial or multi-unit deals, okay, you may find a good deal where it's harder for you to find capital because there may not be as many people with that type of capital to be able to fund those deals. You know what I mean? But on general single family stuff, if you find a good deal good enough with good enough spreads, you can find the capital.
I agree, man. Yeah, I think with me, that's just getting my first one. So going back to my why, it's like, I think I told you this months ago, but I was like, bro, honestly, my goal, my long-term goal for real estate is to be able to be in my purpose in other countries and having this passive income come from this stuff every month. So I know I can count on that every month. To, somebody, because everybody gonna be looking for space, whether it's an Airbnb, single family, a quadplex, part whatever,
right?
Because for me, that's how I've seen it in a way of life. I'm traveling, if I'm out the country doing some agriculture stuff, whatever, I know that I can live off of my rental properties each month. So in macro scope, that is my vision for real estate.
Okay.
It's because I know it's always space is gonna be needed, but then also it's passive income that can be with that. So I just wanted to also add, because you did ask me that question, and as you're talking, more things are coming up.
Yeah.
And so just knowing like something like that, like, you know, in this climate, and I probably know the answer to it, but like giving you that context, like my vision, somebody that you didn't know was to tell you that, like, what would you say are some logical steps to be like, if that's your end goal, well, it's all these other variables, but here's like a universal foundation when it comes to, you know, designing something like that.
Man, I think I think what you said, you hit it on the head.
Yeah.
In terms of what a lot of people's goals are, right? What I would encourage people to understand is, and I got to be careful how I say this because, again, I don't want to be overly critical, right? But there's a level of buzzwords out there like passive income, that are very real for a select few in a group of people, right? But getting started, there's no such thing as passive 100%.
Correct.
Right? There's different levels and degrees to passive, right?
Yeah.
Like this may be completely active. You got to be there all day, every day, right? This one may be 30% active and you got to be there 30% of the time. The other 70%, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when you're dealing in real estate, the desire to get to passive too quickly can be, if you don't understand and check that in terms of reality, you may think you're going to get to passive way faster than you actually are, right? When you're dealing in real estate, even if you give it off to a manager, you got to manage the manager. Even if you give it off to a property manager, you got to manage the property manager, right? You're dealing with tenant turnover. You got decisions to make. You got stuff that breaks. You got AC units to go out. You got insurance claim, roofs that got to be made. You still got to be involved, right? And so it may not be day to day require your attention like something else you may be invested in, right? But I think sometimes those buzzwords and keywords of passive, somebody gets into real estate and they realize immediately a tenant turnover, tenant move out and they tear up your house, how much this is not passive.
Yeah, fact.
Right? And then now, because you had a illusion of passive income, now you're like, that ain't passive. Now you need to go into understanding this is a lot of work. Right. Until you get systems, until you get staff who can manage a lot of that, who can replace you of the oversight. It's going to be some work involved if you want these assets to perform.
Gotcha.
You understand what I'm saying? So passive income is definitely the goal, right? Now, what I'll tell you is, and without going in too much detail in that, there's strategies when it comes to single family home that can help create your single family home to be much more passive than just a traditional rental. Right. And so for people who aspire to have more passive income, that's where I've looked at and talked about when we talk about B2Bank and owner finance and seller financing and the nuances and the details in that of how that allows you to be more passive in your investments, because essentially you're acting as the bank as opposed to a landlord, right? And so there's definitely power in that strategy, and that's one of the reasons I've focused on that at certain periods and certain structures of my portfolio. Right now, I do all types of real estate investing, right? And so, but I say that to say there are more strategies that are more passive, but traditionally even that takes management. Right. So I would say, when you say, if somebody asked me that question, what would be my advice? That's a long way to say, don't expect it to be passive immediately. Right. But stick to your principles of finding good deals, understanding your market, understanding your numbers. And then if you have good deals, it can hide some of the mistakes that you naturally gonna make. You know what I mean? When you buying deals that aren't really that good and you're forced to get rid of them fast and your margins are so thin, and if you don't do this in the next 30 days, like you're gonna lose your mind. Yeah. A lot of that pressure comes because you buy slim margin deals. Right. You know what I mean? So I tell people, when you're getting started, learn as much as you can about the market. If the numbers don't work, don't purchase it. On the buy, right? The money is made on the buy, not the sell.
The money is made on the buy, not the sell.
Yes. Does that make sense to you?
Because if you're selling it, you capped out, but if you're buying it, you can create more from it.
That's a good way to put it. Absolutely. Okay. But the short of that is I make the money when I buy it because I'm negotiating a great deal.
Okay.
Right? If you try to buy it and you know the numbers aren't going to work, but then you think you have some amazing creative strategy, you're going to paint it a certain color, you're going to put a certain countertop in there that's going to increase the value over what everything else is in the neighborhood. That's you trying to add value after you purchased it, because you probably didn't purchase it at a good enough number.
Trying to compensate for something.
Exactly. So when I say the money is made on the buy, that's again, if you find great deals, that's where your money is made. That's where you'll find the capital. That's where you find the partners, whatever it is that you need to get the deal done. But the biggest piece in that is study your market, know your numbers, stick to your numbers, and don't try to create value out of thin air after you purchased it. You need to know what that value is before you go in. And if the numbers don't work, you need to negotiate a better deal, or you need to remove yourself from that deal and go find something else.